is a panel discussion. And we have all the panelists lined up. And since the early 90s, the IT and IT-enabled services sector in India has been of tremendous importance to economy, eventually growing to account for 7.7% of India's GDP in 2016. In an attempt to capitalize on this foundation, the Indian government announced in February 2018 that the government think tank, which is Niti Aayog, will spearhead a national program of AI focusing on research. The question is whether India will see a similar growth in AI software as we saw in 90s with IT. Let us try to understand it through the next panel discussion, which is India's role in building AI software. It is my pleasure to introduce the panel. Please welcome Mr. Manish Singhal, founding partner Pi Venture. Manish Singhal, a 1992 graduate from IIT Kanpur, is a technologist turned entrepreneur turned venture capitalist. He aspires to help put India on deep tech innovation map of the world through his work at Pi Ventures. He brings 28 plus years of experience across diverse set of fields, building cutting edge deep technology products at global scale, mentoring startups, investing in them, and building a deep tech venture fund. Manish started Pi Venture in early 2016 with the vision of accelerating the development of artificial intelligence startups in India. His ability to have a deep level understanding of technology helps to fund in evaluating tech startups in a unique way and build a reputation of being a lead investor for AI and deep tech startups. Before Pi, Manish co-founded letsventure.com and led it to become the leading marketplace for startups and early stage investors in India. After completing his electrical engineering from IIT Kanpur, he was instrumental in building products and team in different startups and established organizations like Sling Media, Lithium Systems, and Motorola. Welcome, Mr. Manish. Our next panelist is Mr. Purushottam Kulkarni. Mr. Purushottam Kulkarni has been working with Microsoft for more than 30 years in product engineering. He relocated to India in 2002 from Redmond. His expertise include leading incubations and concepts to shipping products with a strong passion and focus on user experience. He has engineered multiple products, including DOS-based productivity apps, developer tools, Internet Explorer, data storage, and currently leading customer success engineering and office intelligence team in India Development Center. He spends a lot of his time to mobile productivity applications. He's a graduate of Pune University and has master's degree from Florida Institute of Technology. Please welcome Mr. Kulkarni. It is my pleasure to introduce Mr. Karthik Natarajan, President and Chief Operating Officer of Cyient. Karthik Natarajan joined Cyient in March 2020 as the President and Chief Operating Officer. In this role, he is responsible for global business operations, including sales, delivery, and business development. Karthik has over 27 years of experience in the engineering industry, including about 21 years from the engineering technology services, with a strong focus on product development, digital transformation, and R&D. He has been instrumental in implementing engineering strategies for Fortune 500 customers, developing market expansion programs, driving partnership, and enhancing domain expertise across industry verticals, including A&D, automotive, telecom, industrial, and medical devices. Karthik is widely recognized as a thought leader across the industry and also serves as a co-chair of the Engineering Services Forum at NASSCOM. Before joining Cyient, Karthik was the global head of Tech Mahindra's integrated engineering services business, including digital technologies like mobility, IoT, and Industry 4.0, among others. Karthik holds a degree in mechanical engineering from the University of Madras and MBA from Symbiosis Institute of Business Management, Pune. A very welcome, Mr. Karthik. Our next panelist is Mr. Kaushik Raghavan, Head of AI ML and Data Science at Micron Technology. Kaushik Raghavan is an AI ML leader, data science enthusiast, and software product engineering expert with hands-on experience in designing and building AI ML-based real-time analytical engines and recommender systems. Prior to joining Micron, he has led data science teams in Flick Inc., Applied Materials, and successfully delivered ML products across the semiconductor business spectrum. His areas of expertise include virtual meteorology, recommender system, predictive modeling, prescriptive modeling, cognitive analytics, high frequency time series data analysis, n-dimensional mapping, spatial analysis, statistical and stochastic modeling, NLP, and combinatorial optimization. Kaushik has, to his credit, 20 plus inventions, including 6 patents with the USPO and several publications. Kaushik is a mathematics graduate from the University of Madras and holds a master's in information technology from Anna University and another master's in degree in computer science from Chennai Mathematical Institute. Please welcome Mr. Kaushik. Our last panelist and also the chair of this panel discussion is Mr. Ajay Agarwal from Happiest Mind. He's a serial entrepreneur. Ajay has been instrumental in building world-class products and led multiple startups from incubation to successful exits by building high-caliber teams, adapting to dynamic market conditions, and demonstrating keen understanding of customers and market needs. His Silicon Valley-based startups were funded by likes of Intel Capital and Philips. His most recent venture, Cupola Technology, an IoT engineering company, was acquired by Happiest Mind in May 2017. As a senior vice president at the Analytical Center of Excellence, he spearheads this group of leadership around artificial intelligence, data science, big data, and data engineering, among other innovations. Ajay holds a master's degree from BITS Pilani, Rajasthan, and is a speaker at various industry forums. Please welcome Mr. Ajay and the entire panel once again. I now hand over the stage to Mr. Ajay to chair the session. Thank you.
Thank you, Kamal, for the kind introduction. A warm welcome to everyone, and I'm sure all of us will be looking forward to this session and discussion around India's role in building AI software, especially with our esteemed panel around. As we all know, India is the third largest startup ecosystem in the world. And what it means is that most of us in this fraternity get to work and experience the latest cutting edge AI technology, and more importantly, the transformation at our own backyard. AI, as we know, is touching across all aspects of our life, right from, the AI-driven decisions that are powering our loans or claims approval, the autonomous cars or the AI-assisted vehicle, which is powering our commute, the conversational AI-enabled digital voice assistants, which are actually empowering us with the information that we need, and more importantly, getting it in the context and the channel that we prefer. Similarly, at our workplace, we are adapting AI tools to improve the operational efficiency, all around. AI also has been leading the way in the product and the software development across industries like digital health, where lot of on-demand healthcare, early and accurate detection of diseases, the predictive healthcare, asset analytics around adoption of wearable devices, drug discovery, etc., are all finding great adoption, with the advent of AI. Similarly, in the e-commerce space, which is heating up, we have seen AI improving the customer experience, at the same time help manage the operations at scale, and also allowing a lot of startups and businesses to innovate their business models. There's wide scope of adoption across industry, and having said that, I think we are just at the start of the journey, and there's a lot more for us to continue and reap the benefits of AI. More importantly, there is a lot of initiatives that are happening, with the government, like Government of India with the AI for All program with Niti Aayog, and the Digital India intends to leverage AI in the sectors of healthcare, agriculture, and e-governance, both for India and the global market. Given that context, what seems very exciting for me is that, from an India perspective, unlike in the past, AI, I see that academia, industry, and government, all of them are coming together to accelerate the adoption by enabling various aspects like availability of infrastructure, the adoption of digital initiatives, aligning policies, and incentivizing and promoting the talent as well as the startup, among other initiatives. What we intend to do as part of this discussion is to touch upon some aspects on entrepreneurship, some exciting use cases and transformation involving AI, enablers in terms of the infra and the platform, and more importantly, the objective would be to get you the relevant perspective for you to succeed as an entrepreneur, as an engineer, or a decision maker for your, for your organization. Now, with that, a small context setting, and I would once again welcome Karthik, Purushottam, Manish, and Kaushik to this panel discussion. And let's try to figure out their opinion on India's role of building AI software, and more importantly, why there is so much excitement around this area. Karthik, you want to go first?
Sure. No, thanks, Ajay. First of all, good morning, good evening, everyone, depending on whichever part of the world that you are joining this session from. And thanks to IESA for inviting me to be part of this panel. And first of all, I want to start off by saying that the artificial intelligence that is being talked about is getting more into augmented intelligence. I think it is not about replacing jobs. Yes, it will at some point of time, but it is going to really make a lot of our jobs easier. And given what India has been able to do on the IT and ITES with about $190 billion industry that has been built over the last 3 decades. And this is likely to grow to $500 billion by 2030. I think this is very important segment of digital technology that is going to really pioneer our growth. And the second aspect is this is more for global customers. But if you also look at for India's own survival, I think whether it is about private corporates or government institutions or any of the agencies, this is going to be the biggest lever of differentiation. This is going to be driving the competitiveness. This is going to really improve the productivity significantly. And this is really going to make whether the healthcare for all or education for all, or to secure our cities, to make sure that all the citizens are living safely and securely, and to deliver services to citizens. I think you take any walk of life, I think AI will be pervasive. And there is absolutely no question in my mind saying that we have to really start nurturing AI as a key differentiator for the country, for the corporate, and as an individual engineers or people who want to really be employed in this country. I think this is going to be a most important element for everyone. The second element I also want to bring out is about the consumer related artificial intelligence versus enterprise. I think it is definitely known how well things are getting personalized, whether it is e-commerce, retail, or media and entertainment. How do I really get my recommendation engine which reads or which knows about what is my preferences and all of them? And banking, financial services, insurance, I think this is essentially very well known. But I think the biggest adoption for the next 10, 15 years is going to be around the enterprise side. I think every leading enterprise, whether it is in manufacturing, healthcare, or anything on logistics, transport, I think all of them have to really bring in AI as a key differentiator. And in the next decade, you will find that the enterprises would be segregated like the rich enterprises and poor enterprises. The enterprises which are AI-led and the other enterprises would be classified as miscellaneous. And India is likely to add about $1 trillion to the economy on AI for the next 15 years. And we already have about 250,000 people who are employed in some form of analytics and AI. And we need about 1 million engineers in the next 5 to 10 years. How do you think we are going to add 1 million more engineers who will really bring the thought leadership? US and China have taken a significant lead. I don't think India can afford to wait for some more time. And the amount of patents, the amount of research that is happening across facial, text, speech, or video analytics, I think there is significant amount of progress that has been made by US and Chinese startups and governments and private enterprises. I think India has to catch up, and this is going to be a decade for India to catch up on this front.
Thanks, Karthik. And very interestingly, you brought up the point of AI being a differentiator across the industries. And the other important aspect around AI being augmenting human rather than replacing human. I think, with that, Purushottam, what is your viewpoint, on this topic?
So, first of all, thank you. Thank you, Ajay. Thank you, all the panelists. And good afternoon to the audience. Well, good afternoon from my side, based on the time zone I am in. I truly appreciate you taking the time to join the session today, to all the audience. So thank you. Let me talk about why this is such an exciting time for India, right? Worldwide, this whole phenomenon started. I was just reading Manish's article on AI, and yes, he talked about, AI has been in winters for decades, right? So in some 1956 or thereabouts, some research started in Dartmouth, I think I got the name right? And, since then, it has kind of lived in that narrow band of innovation for a number of years, right? Now, what makes it then opportunity for India, right? And I think the way I look at it is this is our opportunity to show the leadership in building the intelligence services and software. I equate this to the VNext of the software rally that started in the 80s. So Ajay touched upon it a little bit. Karthik talked about in the large numbers of software analytics roles that are already existing in the industry and other things, right? So it is like the rally that started in the 80s, which continued to accelerate in the 90s and into the new millennium, right? And in now 2020, we have all the ingredients to kickstart. It's almost like a get, set, go kind of a state that we are in building all of these services, applications, whatever you want to call it, right? Just look at what we have in front of us. We have a large number of skilled software and hardware engineers, right? We only talk about software engineers all the time, but hardware has played an important role in this. Innovations have played an important role here, right? We have world-class AI researchers. Just look at the number of AI research papers that are originating from our region. It's a large number compared to what it was 10 years back. You'll see that number almost kind of like a hockey stick kind of going up every year, right? We have lots of advances in the hardware, like the NPUs, the data transfer speeds, like in 5G that are happening. Every university is also augmenting their curriculum to incorporate the data science basics, the basic analytics, and all of those kind of basic skills, right? In addition to that, we have the proliferation of the smartphones, the smart devices. I read somewhere that by 2021, the number of smartphones is going to be some 760 or 750 million, right? That's 3/4 of a billion devices. And these are just the smartphones. There are going to be many other devices that everybody keeps talking about, to make the entire space intelligent. And on top of that, we have this new generation of entrepreneurs, right? Government is kind of promoting that. The entrepreneurs are ready to take those risks. We have venture capitalists who are kind of helping them. We have mentors who are kind of helping them as well. So put all of these things together. When you put all of these things together, it's very clear that we have the huge potential to innovate in the space of not only on the service side, server side intelligence, but on the edge kind of intelligence, to kind of ethically and responsibly build these intelligence services. One of the things that Karthik said was about, hey, the enterprises are the ones which are going to be the next phase, right? There's a lot of consumer intelligence personalization already in place, but the enterprise is the one that is going to take space. And I absolutely agree with it, because that's where the building these services, building these solutions in an ethical way, in a responsible way, keeping the privacy, keeping all of these stringent compliance requirements in place, is going to give us the edge in building all of these solutions. In all, we are kind of sitting on this gold mine, right? It's a gold mine of all of these pieces if you put them together. And that's what excites me. That's what is exciting for me. I started my journey as a software engineer. I've been software engineer all my life, right? But this new aspect is something that is truly exciting, is like truly a learning opportunity for me personally as well. But for the industry, I think this is where we will go forward in the next decade. And this is our time.
That is fantastic. So when there will be a lot of people who will resonate that they will remain engineers for life, me being one of them. Now, I think a couple of things that you actually resonated well was that this is our opportunity to take leadership, and there are signs around it, signals around it, which we should pick up. And the other aspect is the ability to use AI responsibly, and again, to do that, you again go back to Karthik's point where you look at, augmenting human to basically eliminate those biases and make those, software better. Manish, now, coming back to you, I think you bring a very interesting proposition to the table. You have been, technopreneur or an engineer yourself, and then from the last decade plus, you have been actually enabling the ecosystem, startup ecosystem in India, around the AI and deep tech technologies. It'll be interesting to hear your perspective on this topic.
Sure. I think one experience summarizes how AI has grown in our own mind. When I was raising money for our AI thesis back in 2016, one of the investors asked me, I know Air India needs money, but why are you raising for them? And today, if you look at it, even a kid knows what AI is, right? So that is the kind of mindset change or exposure change that has happened to a technology like artificial intelligence today. With every such thing comes a lot of hype, comes a lot of crap, if to use that word. And in that haystack, you have to find the needles. That is my job. So I think what I'm excited about AI is not the general propagation of AI, which may be useful and may be important. But what truly excites me in my capacity as a venture capitalist is companies who are using AI to solve disruptive problems. So what does that mean? I'll give you 2-3 examples from our portfolio. We have a company called IESA, which has created a whole mental health conversation platform using AI, where you don't need to talk to a human therapist, but a IESA platform can actually help you resolve your anxieties and depressions and whatever it may be, right? It's very, very difficult problem to solve, but these guys have done it, and they have now 3 million plus users across the world. We have a company like Niramai, which is solving breast cancer screening in very, very early stage using thermal and AI. We have Locus, we have Pixis, which does marketing automation. So generally what we have found is that if, and this is very heartening for me to see, because I've seen last 30 years, we were primarily a service nation to say, and then we sort of somewhere became product nation or did not become partially done. But I think truly we can become a deep tech nation in the next 10 years, where we can find these global problems which are getting disrupted on the back of good use of AI, in a very smart way of use of AI, and solve those global problems right from here, from India. That is what truly excites me about AI.
That's fantastic, Manish. And I think truly AI is everywhere, and that gets symbolizes by the investments that you have done in the health tech, logistic, and marketing companies. So pretty much covering across various domains. Coming to your Kaushik, very interesting profile from maths to data science to all different aspects of data science, from recommendation to advanced analytics. You have covered it all. It will be good to understand your perspective, especially from a technology point of view.
Oh, thank you, Ajay. And it was wonderful statements put forth by the industry leaders. And interestingly, I come from the softer side of the hardware, right? So I've been in the manufacturing for almost 2 decades. And one of the things that has really amused me today is the amount of data that was collected, right? So I look at it as 2 sessions. One is pre-COVID, the other one is post-COVID. When I started in the technology around 180 nanometer, and they were talking about 90, and then 65 was in the R&D, because they always work on n+1 and n+2 nodes, right? And now, from then to now, if I look at it, a typical wafer, the amount of life the wafer spends on the chamber going through the process is still the same. It's about 120. But then, how do we create? Because we don't have too many fabs. The fabs are shrinking. It's getting consolidated. And how do we achieve the volume that we have seen today is purely based on the amount of data collected and analyzed. The best part is, in the entire 120 days the wafer spends, right? It either sits going through some thermal changes on top of it, or waiting for an inspection to be done. An inspection being cost. There are multiple ways in terms of different algorithms started from India 2 decades back. I can proudly say that I would probably be the first generation to have been in India, gone through the global problems, solving global problems, by having 1 foot in India and 1 foot in the air on the flight, not on Air India though, but in the flight to solve the global problems, right? So today, every minute the wafer spends generates about 1 million data points. And imagine today we have end-to-end traceability on the wafer front end for the entire 120 days of whichever tool, whichever process line, and whichever chamber, and which node and which chuck. Now, post-pandemic, this has exploded by means of digitization, right? So the entire organization are looking to digitize, and what they say is they can gain up to 18% of their revenue as a value kickback when they digitize multiple value chains, right? And that's predominantly, we are looking at $1 trillion as Karthik said, and this is tons of money that's waiting to be. And not only that, today we are even collaborating with our suppliers and our clients, customers as well, so that they create this end-to-end traceability. This is not something new, because if we look at pharma, this existed, because it is a drug which goes into the field. let's say the drug starts behaving differently after 10 years, they would need to go back and prepare an antidote and trace all the things that had gone into it. Aviation had it almost 50 years back, and they were pioneers. Those things were there predominantly because it was touching people's life. Today, it started coming because we are enriching people's life. So as much as the value that has come into the life today, the time is also equally valued, and these are the things that are coming back to it. And today I'm sitting at a place where I look at end-to-end traceability pre-silicon. So this 4,500 steps, all I talked about until pre-COVID, talked about the entire front end, right? There is a whole life before the birth of the first design. When I say the design is ready, the chip is ready for, let's say, for a data center for Microsoft, or a particular memory that goes into any of our hardware, there is a whole new world of pre-birth. And this is where we are working towards complete traceability. And that's really exciting. And reflecting back, AI, when the whole world started AI, predominantly it started in US. India was very quick to adopt because of our very, very strong math DNA, right? Be it Aryabhatta and Bhaskara 5,000 years back, or to Shankara and Madhava in the medieval period, or even towards the millennials, right? We talk about Sikdar, you talk about Sankarsha, you talk about Ramanujam, right? So math has been, STEM has been our strong point, right? Whether you call it as trigonometry or 3D geometry in canonical forms, we've been able to measure the Mount Everest even without having to scale it, right? That was possible. All we are doing is we are taking our software knowledge, which gained over the last 4 decades, and marrying it to our math DNA, probably activating it and combining that to provide this. And in fact, one of the article Karthik wrote last September, if my memory serves right, for NASCOM, right, engineering R&D space. So he talked about how the engineering R&D, we have about 1,200 global development centers in India, and close to 700,000 engineers working on it. And it's about $100 billion value waiting for us to go and grab a pie. And then on the other end, we have a $400 billion software market. And this AI in software is definitely as much as the engineering R&D, and definitely.
That is, I think, fantastic, Kaushik. I think you gave a great perspective on the pre-COVID and the post-COVID,
Right.
And more importantly, how India is adapting and playing a larger role in this, in this field of AI. Moving on to the next discussion topic, Manish, I want to come to you. You have been in forefront, in terms of investment in India around startups in the AI technology. And to me, it seems that the PE and the VC community has a view that anything to do with AI related solutions, they have to be valued, valued better. Now, as an early investor in this area, especially in India, how has the focus and the maturity of the startups evolved over time?
I not necessarily agree with that philosophy that it has to be valued differently. I think I keep saying, actually, at least for us, we are an AI focused fund, but we don't look for AI companies. We are very, very clear about that. What does that mean? We look for companies which are solving problems in logistics, in problems in marketing automation, healthcare, etc., powered by AI. And that is a fundamental difference. If we put AI first in the whole thing, then it just crashes the whole thinking about what problem we are solving. And they get valued by the business they're solving. Now, sometimes what happens is, and I'll give you a couple of examples. One of our companies went from $0 to $9 million in ARR in less than 16 months. At least in last 20 years, I've been involved in startups. I have not seen that kind of growth in any company, right? And why is this happening? Because what they did is they used AI very smartly, and they were able to turn that problem statement around and solve it in a very disruptive, we call it the 10x way. And suddenly you find all customers coming to them, all investors coming to them, everything coming to them, right? So essentially, it is about the goodness of the solution more than just being an AI company. If you are doing peddling incremental innovation, then your life is sucked out. You will have pricing pressures, you will have competition, etc. So what we look for again is that disruptive edge where You are able to solve that problem 10x better than anybody else. And then because you're solving that problem 10x better, it attracts capital, it attracts customers' capital as well as investors' capital at a premium pricing.
Fantastic, money. So basically, it's a business first, enabled by AI is what we are,
Absolutely.
looking at.
Absolutely.
Now, Kaushik, coming back to you, you bring in a very, different perspective from a technology perspective. Both you and Micron have been hugely focused on enabling the compute infra, especially around the memory. At the same time, you have customer-centric solution. Can you share your perspective on the change in the landscape in terms of how it has enabled the acceleration of AI?
Oh, definitely. So if you look at Micron's results over the past, every 6-7 quarters, the demand was fairly, by the NAND and the DRAM, and predominantly driven by the mobile and also the memories associated with the data centers. We are still waiting for the surge to open up for 5G. That's without taking 5G into account. So if you look at the whole, let's say if we look at Microsoft's backbone, right? Micron provides the memory. So predominantly the focus is about having an in-compute memory, and where we at an R&D center create softwares at even at firmware level, which can quickly react at the chipset level, at the hardware level, make some decisions at the root real time. So you would have come across this chipagadon term that came up recently, where most of the production car companies stopped their production because the chip shortage, right? It was not just restricted to high-end cars where we say, oh, it's all high-end cars, everything is electronics. Most of the normal cars, which has these ADAS systems, right, had been put on hold, and predominantly because these things are required to make decisions at the compute level. And as soon as you get a hardware looking at an image which is predominantly large, it has to be processed and reacted and course corrected almost immediately, right? Whether we are looking to channelize their thing, or blind spot detection, or an autonomous emergency braking. So all these things are coming into place to enrich people's life. So going back to the memory, the in-compute memory, where VLSI design, as Purushottam also rightly said, right? It is not just the software. There's the hardware and the software. How do the software enable the
I think let's
making?
for Kaushik to
Marrying these two is the key.
Sure. Thanks, Kaushik, for that. And I personally have seen the exploration and the huge amount of growth in data, the ability to consume data, the focus, coming from enterprises to mine data, and obviously the infra has scaled, to basically make that happen. Coming back to you, Karthik, you and Cyient have been at the forefront of enabling digital transformation for various industries like energy, utilities, aerospace across the globe. What are the key digital transformation stories augmented by AI that we'll want to share with us, and also more importantly, if you can give the India context around those stories, it will be helpful to us and the audience.
Sure, thanks, Ajay. Very interesting perspective from other panelists as well. So to start off, what I also want to take us to the last 30 years. If you look at what has happened in terms of whether it is compute or storage, and the storage cost of a GB was about $500,000. Now it is about 5 cents in 30 years. So you can imagine that it has improved by 10 million times. And with compute, which is going to be available at near edge or close to the device, and with cloud, I think this is going to really be ripe for disruption in terms of the number of use cases. So what will happen is, whatever the use cases that we worked on in the last 5 years may not be relevant for the next 10 years too. Because the reason why I'm saying that is, there is close to about 45 zettabyte of data that is available today globally. And interestingly, 80% of this data has come in the last 3 years. And this 45 zettabytes is likely to be probably 175 to 200 zettabytes by 2025. And interestingly, the 3 years of 2022 to 25 are likely to contribute to more than 70-80% of this data. So you have to really understand the context of where we operate, and also bringing in the cognitive security. I think Manish talked about the needle in the haystack. I think you really need to bring in security, which is going to be a biggest challenge that need to be overcome. And what we have seen across the industries, I think many leaders talked about it, be it on healthcare or smart cities, and how do you think you can provide security surveillance, which is going to be based on extreme value distribution. They are not normal distribution, right? Because in a 24-hour period, you may not have an incident. Maybe in a 200-hour period, you may not have an incident, but you have an incident for a few seconds. How do you think it can be detected and acted upon? So that's going to be very, very critical as compared to many of the use cases that you will find. And similarly for the fraud detection and anything about security intrusions, I think all these cases are extreme value distribution where you really need to look for those one instance that you are really waiting for that to happen. And the second important thing, what I also want to bring out is the importance of data governance, because it is not so much about garbage in, garbage out. How do you make sure that you are able to get the data cleaned up, whether you are analyzing for time series or unstructured data, and what is the best way to really go through a structured process before you can really start making it for ingestions. And we have seen many use cases, whether it is on healthcare, be it on radiology, oncology, or cardiology. And I think if India were to solve 600 million people who don't get access to basic healthcare, I don't think we can really solve that without technology. I think it is to be definitely going to be addressed through AI, and it's going to augment the doctors. And that's the only way by which we can solve this problem in the next decade. And similarly for education. And if you want to really get probably 200 million children to be educated in the next 10 years, I don't think we can do it with our conventional system. So it has to be done through smart intelligence that has to come into play as far as education is concerned. The third, which is the automotive one, which many people talked about, I think thanks to the advent of GPUs and ASIC designs, and I think this is really powering the image recognition and the video analytics. And I think that's going to really drive the usage-based insurance. And how do you think you can really drive more safety? While I don't want to use the word autonomous, because yes, autonomous is an interesting concept, but to me, autonomous is equal to safety. So how do I really drive incremental safety year on year, which is going to be creating a more perpetual way of a safer environment that we are going to deal with? I think all this with addition of 5G, I can tell you that this is going to create the new set of use cases in the next 5 years, which is a lot different than what we have seen in the last 10 years, because 5G is going to make cloud and edge to be seamless. And if that's going to be seamless, you can really imagine the new set of use cases that is going to get built up. And whether it is AI-based inspection, I've come across startups which can probably, they said, don't give me your manufacturing process, don't give me your inspection process, just allow 2 cameras to be positioned in front of your machining center, and we'll let you know how good your manufacturing processes are not. To me, that was a shocker, because I said, I need a process plan, I need the complete methods plan. And they said, you don't need to give me anything, because I will tell you how good or how bad your process is and what are the inefficiencies that has been built into that. So it is about trying to be contextual, trying to look at the business case and make sure that your data governance is assured, and don't lose thread of the security part, which is going to be paramount importance as we start deploying AI at scale.
This is fantastic, Karthik, and you touched upon various sectors like automotive, edutech, e-com, the cyber analytics and things like that. I think they are so very relevant to the context in India. The other important aspect that I want to highlight is, in most cases, we see data governance as an afterthought, where, as you rightly pointed out, it should be at the top of the stack, because if you're putting up a data strategy, if your enterprises have to run with data being, in the forefront, it makes sense for the data governance to take, prominence, in your end-to-end strategy. Purushottam, now coming to you, you and Microsoft have had a huge focus on data and AI, and this goes back, a long way. You have been pioneers in terms of accelerating AI adoption around cloud platforms, especially the cloud data platforms. And Microsoft also has invested in the India ecosystem, in a long way, in terms of the sales team, in terms of the startup ecosystems and things like that. Now, it will be interesting to hear from your experiences of AI adoption in India.
So let me kind of split this in a couple of parts, the question. One is about in what way Microsoft as an organization. So let me wear a Microsoft hat for a few minutes. I'm not trying to kind of go overboard on what Microsoft has been doing, but there are 3 different initiatives that Microsoft has, right? And I'm sure other companies who are in that position have done that as well. One is a global sales has something called Startup Pod, right? Where the startup on tech, helping the startups in partnering with the leading VCs and advisors is what the sales team does. There's a scale-up program where for the organizations where we work with partners and the startup to kind of tailor the ready-made solutions for B2B startups. It's narrower focused than a broad initiative like a startup pod, right? And then we also have something called, we call it M2 program, M12 program, where we act like a VC, which is a narrower focus. It's very handful companies that Microsoft funds and Microsoft invests into. So that's one part of in what way Microsoft has been kind of building these accelerator programs in not just AI space, but across the board. The other aspect that you talked about, which is the cloud first and the data. Everybody's been talking about the data multiplying to such a degree, which is almost humanly impossible to digest in any way, shape, or form, no matter how much you clean up or other things you do. And that's where the cloud first aspects come in, and that's where Microsoft has been kind of spending a lot of energy through Azure as a product. And there are other companies. AWS has been on the forefront. Google has been working on things. So there are different companies that are providing platforms, towards the cloud first kind of architectures, cloud first things. One of the things that is going to, like Karthik said, is going to start to blur the lines where because of the fast 5G kind of networks or whatever comes after that, are kind of the need for the heavy computing and the need is going to blur, where you have to have heavy computing done on the cloud, and then something on the very lightweight models on the devices and other things, right? Once you have the smaller and smaller latency, it starts to make these applications richer and actually for the end users, right? And the new scenarios will emerge out of it. So the aspects that are big challenging things that I see for a software engineer like me or architects is the scale of the data collection in a compliant manner. There are a lot of complex restrictions in every geography, right? We can't just willy-nilly collect data from every application from every user and things like that. All right. There are the policies for retention. Again, different geos play a lot of lot of restrictions into it, right? The data privacy aspects, the data pipeline at scale, right? Building inferencing engines at scale. Take any of these largely used applications. PowerPoint, we saw some of the presenters using PowerPoint in earlier presentations, right? The slide designer of the PowerPoint, the slide designer recommendations in the PowerPoint designers. All of these are getting powered by the intelligence, right? Powered by different models that get built. Now, it is at scale. It has to be compliant. It has to be ethical. It has to be responsible, right? And I think all of those become the big challenges for not only from the scale perspective, like operating at scale for the billions of users that we talked about, but also in terms of how do we kind of enable these things in a responsible manner, right? And I think those are the aspects that I would like to kind of just put in front of the audience.
I think you bring in a great point, Purushottam. It's just not building a functional product, but it's also important to have the ability to scale, the ability to manage, and basically deliver the continuous intelligence that will be the need of our as we go along. And more importantly, with restrictions like GDPR and other things, compliances coming in, you got to be compliant, around that as well. But more importantly, thinking all of this ahead of time and getting a product, basically fit to market as soon as possible. I think those are key enablers from the cloud platform that we see around. Now, moving on, I think a lot of our audiences, as entrepreneurs, as engineering mindset, they will be interested in knowing, how do we enable ourselves? So, Karthik, that IT skills are very dynamic in nature. The COVID has only aggravated that situation with the adoption of technology and the newer skills that are there. Now, the IT professionals are always challenged to learn newer skills and stay relevant in the market. Now, can you throw some light on what and why certain skills will become more valuable or are more valuable at this point of time? And what are your recommendations to sort of address that?
Sure. No, I think that's a very important question. In fact, this is going to keep many of the CEOs and CXOs not to sleep well in the night, because how do they really build the talent pool at scale? I think this is the biggest question mark in front of many of us. So the question that I would really like to answer is, see, if you really see that you need a pyramid for this. For example, if you look at, you need million engineers in AI for the next decade. And if you try to break down like an engineer does in terms of breakdown into smaller problems that you can solve, you may still need about 800,000 people who can help in doing the data engineering, which is like plowing the data, making sure it is clean, it is neat, and it is ready for ingestion. I think that's going to be still the majority of work. You may still need about 50, 60,000 people who are more on the algorithm side. You need PhDs, and you need people who can really specialize in many of these areas, who can write those algorithms. So you need to really find a way to get this mix right, and also encourage more academic participation, and ensure that most of the academia are relating to solve some of the industry problems. I think this is the time for industry and academia to collaborate to build this million plus engineers that we need for AI. And NASSCOM has already launched this future skilling program where there are more than 50,000 people who registered already. And how do you think this would probably be scaled up over the next 5 to 7 years? And also trying to go to tier 2 cities, because in AI, the interesting part is, if you really go down to the lowermost end of the value chain, whether it is data annotation, so you're talking about video analytics, you're talking about perception data, and the data annotation part. And I've read in one of the articles in 2017, China was building a tier 2 city, which is a rural part of China, and saying that they are building about 100,000 people whose job is only to do the annotation jobs. So maybe you'll find that there is a new KPO or a BPO that is emerging on AI. How do you think you can also take some of them to the remote cities? So I think this is going to be a way by which you are going to break down this into 3 or 4 chunks. And how do you think you have to solve this problem? The other element I also want to leave for us to consider is, every device is going to find some mechanism of, it's going to see us, it's going to learn from us, it's going to hear us. And we really need to think about how do we build scale at individual points, whether it is text recognition or speech recognition, or trying to really look at voice recognition along with video analytics. How do you think you're able to bring a level of scale that you can do for certain pockets of AI? I think that is going to really help if you do some clustering, saying that there are some cities which will build on speech and some will build on video analytics. I think it can really help us to scale in the next decade for sure.
So Karthik, you bring in very interesting point. First of all, you basically build a pyramid in terms of where the requirements are. And I completely agree with you. Basically, 50% of a job, even for a data scientist, goes in basically cleaning up the data. And if ever so, the data is clean enough and mature enough for any inferences to be done on top of that. The second element that you brought upon is like you can work from anywhere. Can you enable people at the remotest places to work and contribute? And the third element that you brought in, can you find the right solution for the right problem, and hence invest in building the right skill sets around automating and utilizing that. Now that brings in very, very interesting perspective, Karthik. Thanks for that. Now let's look at the other side of the pyramid, the other side of the pyramid, isn't it? Now, Manish, from an entrepreneur angle and his viewpoint, what is the advice that you'll want to give in terms of leveraging AI, for their ventures?
Yeah, I think it's about just a simple thing, right? It is not an end, but a means. And the focus should be on solving the problem that the market needs or your customer need. And then don't go by the hype and sandwich and try to over position AI in everything. Try to see what that problem needs, what can AI do differently for that problem? Let me put it this way. And in our thesis, we say, so that is a general advice for everyone. But for us, Pi Ventures, we say, what can AI enable 10x difference to the business problem that you're solving, right? So that's the disruptive AI part. And not just use it for the namesake or just use it because others are using it and things like that. So I think it has to be goal driven. It has to be business driven. It cannot be AI driven per se.
Fantastic, Manish. Now, Kaushik, coming to you, especially with regards to the customer-centric product that you are involved in. Now, every company or every enterprise in in a way or form, has grafted AI as part of their initiatives. If not at a surface level, you will find it across all architectures and infrastructures. Now, what would be your advice to the decision makers of the company on the approach to either build or buy, a right-sized, AI-driven, package or a solution, so to speak?
Wonderful. This can be looked at in two bins, right? For ease of clarity. Bin one is the small and medium enterprises, and then bin two is large organizations. So if I look at large organizations, as rightly thinking, there are multiple packets of AI effort being done in their own individual value chains, right? If we are not going to solve a problem that is not going to be niche, which doesn't involve the intuition of the business that needs to be in place. For example, if I have 1 million pictures with me and labeled as dogs and cats, I just have to train them. But instead, if I have only 8 wafers and I do not know where the complexity of my chip failing in these 8 wafers, I do not know which temperature to be gauged, where I will need 3 million plus experiments to be done to do a full design of experiments. That is where we need to go deeper to understand it. So depending on the use case and the business case, and depending on each of the value chain, we should pick and choose. You can always start with buying, because you will understand how much you will not know. When initially people are investing, we will not know how much we need to, so we can go to the existing ones. But for people who are into deeper AI space, look at it in the pyramidal form. 90% or 80% of them in the lower part of the pyramid can, depending on whichever bin they are, they can make use of the buy farm. But people who are into niche, for example, can I understand my previous 2 generation and look at where is my complexity for my next generation chip which is going to come, because the rates are dropping by the hour, right? Cost of the new die and the technology is dropping by the hour, and the complexity is increasing multifold, which means I will have and the volume of sales is going to be really 10x times. So if I'm going to bring in a new technology which is 2 days before anyone else, then I'm going to take that 300 million additional units of market share, for which my work started almost 2 years before. So in those cases where we know very clearly this is the high value problem that we are going to solve, we got to go deeper. When we are going deeper, we should also build in the domain intuition and the SME intuition into the AI solution. So in those niche cases, we have to build it. In most of the cases, for us to extract the value through AI, we can just go and buy it at farm.
That is great, Kaushik. So basically, there is no one size that fits all. Depending on your use case and what you intend to achieve, you got to go and pick up whether you want to build or buy, or you want to build and then get converted into a buy as you mature. I know, Karthik, you have to you have a hard stop in few minutes, but before that, any summary or any comments that you want to make?
Sure. I think some of the points about the business models and pricing, Ajay, it's going to be another interesting one that's evolving. And I've read in one of the analyst report which says that the customer experience is about 8% margin improvement. And if some companies which are adopting AI more successfully in making a new customer experiences are likely to command 8% premium than others. So nothing more is critical than trying to get that 8% through adoption of AI. So the business models that are likely to evolve, which is going to be whether it is per scan or per travel or per device kind of thing. I think it is going to be really evolving in a as a service or a SaaS or a PaaS model. I think that is going to be pervasive. The third important thing is dynamic pricing. I think this is going to be the word that all of us will start hearing. I think this is about what we heard in smart grid or in terms of air travel. I think this is going to be pervasive across every segment. And depending on the demand supply, I think you may need to agree on a pricing. And if you need to really get to that, AI is going to really facilitate this particular aspect of it. I'm personally fascinated and excited with what AI can offer for us. And I'm sure there is a future that we would be a lot more intelligent, smart, and connected. And this is going to be an exciting period for all of us in this area of semiconductors, engineering, and trying to really look at the future technologies. I think all of us should be blessed to be part of this segment and see this growth happening right in front of our eyes. And thank you everyone for patiently listening and providing me an opportunity to share my views.
Thanks, Karthik. A pleasure having you. And the margin utilization of 8% coming from the CEO, makes, adds that much more value to your statement, so to speak. Now, Manish, I know you also have a hard stop. Before you summarize, Manish, is it, I just wanted to understand, when you look at innovation at scale, isn't it, like, what are your inputs on that, especially with regards to human augmentation with AI, and then you can summarize, your point of view on this, on the overall topic as well.
Sure. I think there is a lot of opportunity. So we are a big fan of what we call as human plus AI. The fact that okay, let me step back. So first of all, I think in the initial part of when AI was just coming to fore, especially in 2016-17 in the commercial applications, one of the consistent questions I was faced in our thesis is whether it will lead to job loss, right? And somehow I don't face that question anymore, right? So I think somewhere people have understood that it is not about job loss. It's about augmenting and scaling more bandwidth for people and letting them do something else. Maybe it may be a job transition, but it is definitely not job loss. And to me, that is very critical, because if you think about a pyramid sort of a structure where you have a few quality resources, but you have a large demand to be met, like in education, like in healthcare, you just cannot bridge this gap by training more people. It is just not possible. So a technology layer has to come in the middle, which sort of learns from that quality resources and then makes it more accessible, right? That's another model of looking at how AI can augment the entire access to quality resources, right? So, and therefore, I believe that AI should be and will actually will obviously augment and further the human ability to do things. We've seen that in multiple experiments.
That's a fantastic perspective, using AI to enable skills, So,
yeah, absolutely. And overall summary, I think there is a lot of hype around AI, and there is in that hype there is some genuine work happening. I think we need to just keep working on that. So find that genuine work. Whenever there is a technology disruption, it always happens like this, So there is nothing new in it. So don't discount AI because there is hype, and don't count on AI because there is not on high, right? So you have to just stay focused on the problem and use AI as a means to solve it.
I think that is fantastic, Manish, and thanks for giving a lot of those practical viewpoints on this topic. As always, much appreciated, always a pleasure.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much. You guys have a good day, and thank you so much for inviting me here. My apologies, I'm kind of rushing out of the panel. Thank you so much.
So
thanks, Manish.
Thank you, Manish. So let's continue. I think Purushottam, let me pick up your brains. One of the things that we see in AI is AI is moving out of the proof of concept or proof of value to actually getting deployed at scale. We spoke about the manufacturing example. You look at a product quality being monitored with multiple factories, getting video streams coming pretty much in near real time. And that would need that AI has to be operationalized. ML has to be operationalized. AI has to work, work at scale. Now, how is the overall ecosystem? Both the cloud platform and the ecosystem, as well as the open source, enabling this, this change in, change in behavior or adoption of AI.
So great questions. I think the scale aspect we kind of touched upon a little bit earlier. This entire once your user base kind of starts to increase, once the usage starts to increase, the amount of data that you are collecting and all the assumptions, baseline assumptions of responsibly collecting the data and all those things, once that starts to increase, the data ingestion at that scale, sending the data from your devices, whether they're wired, whether they're metered networks, all of those kind of networks, and then sending it for ingestion and all phases of cleaning up the data, all of that has to happen, whether it happens in a batch mode, whether it happens as a periodic thing or happens as a real time. One of the demos that I saw was the vehicles kind of thing, the previous session when somebody showed product demos, the vehicles moving in the traffic and doing the analysis of some of those. So some of those have to be real time, some of those have to be on. But the scale with which the ecosystem has to kind of operate, right? Right from the the providers of the networks to the providers of the Azure kind of services where you're hosting all of this data, you're computing all of this, you have inference engines that are running, and then augmenting it back into the application, right? Augmenting back into the application, which is where your core application comes in. All of that operating at scale and having the higher and higher accuracy, because that's what the expectations of the users would be, right? I think that aspect is critical for any successful scenario to kind of feel successful, feel that the users are confident, users are going to trust that particular application. That entire augmentation loop, if you want to call it that way, or you can call it a looping back into the user's hands on the device. I think that scale is the ecosystem, and there are multiple players into it, right? It's the devices which allow you to have local inferencing. It is the services which allow you to have inferencing on the cloud and kind of augmenting that onto the device so that you can now provide richer experiences onto the device. It's the service providers who are going to provide a fast data ability, which are going to kind of move that data faster from cloud into your hands. And so it is that. So it's all, the entire ecosystem is kind of at play. And at the end of the day, all of this, and then we have to have the smart software engineers who are going to write the code, which is going to be efficient code to kind of take that and actually render it to the user, right? I think these aspects to me are kind of crucial going forward.
That's a great point, Purushottam. And what excites me is the ability for edge devices and the cloud platform to work in a synchronous manner to basically give the serverless compute kind of thing that is required. The ability to learn and transform, from one environment to another environment, and that makes AI and the AI applications, so very exciting. Any final comments from you, Purushottam?
One kind of a simple invitation to all the software and hardware engineers who are in the session today, right? It is to start investing in learning data engineering and basic analytics skills, right? That's what I would say. It doesn't mean that you get away from your coding, your design, your debugging skills, right? Don't treat the data engineering or basic analytics as a role. Treat that as a basic skill, right? And so by doing that, you're transforming yourself to kind of get ready for the next decade, and not create a specialized stream of skills, because at some point that is going to get commoditized, right? But treat this as a skill as opposed to treating this as a role is what would be my invitation to all the software and hardware engineers in this room. That would be my closing thoughts.
That is fantastic. I am a firm believer that you should know your adjacencies, because that gets you a better context, in what you do. Moving on to you, Kaushik, any parting comments from you?
Hey, that was a wonderful talk, Purushottam, so deep and so wide. So there are two aspects. Finally, it all boils down to when computers came, people were worried about losing jobs, and now all of us are tech savvy, all of us are gadget savvy. It has only enriched our lives. And when initial AI came, people thought about automation, and because of the explosion of the volume and the complexity, it is not possible for us to create multiple clones. At the same time, it is not possible for us to spend 21 hours, 22 hours, or even 28 hours a day to ensure everything is done, because most of the ones that we talk about today, people are making decisions based on it. So it is invariably real-time feed forward and real-time feedback mechanism that's happening today. My traffic live update is helping me to plan my time accordingly, and my network bandwidth update is going to help me so many things, and works so on and so forth. The VPN, everything is all about business and connectivity. So when we go back, there is again a dilemma of should I build it in the cloud, or should I build it or keep the data modeling at the node level, right? So often think about hybrid model, right? Because building at the cloud is give you a macro picture about the whole scenario that we are trying to talk about. But at the same time, the nature of the asset that we are trying to model and build is not going to change at a stroke of the second. So retraining or understanding state transition can happen at the node level. whether you talk about IoT devices, you talk about edge intelligence, you talk about sensor intelligence, that doesn't change. Most importantly, today, COVID has taught us to try to do things remote. So imagine the entire country became work from home mode for 95% of its workforce in flat less than 48 hours. It is remarkable. It has helped us understand what is the potential that we have, what is the infrastructure, help us understand the whole new lot about what we did not know or what we did not dare to do a little earlier. So we got to make use of that, and it cannot be taken away without the AI and the support that the AI provided. We cannot take that away from. It has really helped us enrich our lives. Last but not least, gone are the days of monolithic, humongous, single purpose, high performance computing, right? The nature of the problem data is different. The nature of the problem is different. So, and nature of the analytics is obviously different, right? All these are converging into what is the birth of a heterogeneous system. Today, what people need is a cheaper, smarter, real-time, heterogeneous system which can tell them what's going to happen today, yesterday, right? Summing it up all, fire, water, and AI are very good servants, but bad masters.
Thank you, Kaushik, for that fantastic parting note. I know as we discussed with our panelists, I think India has the potential to lead the way to leverage AI and be a glue between both humans and machines, and bring about disproportionate amount of value to everyone in the ecosystem. Also, as a lot of panelists pointed out, I think we are well positioned to emerge as a global leader. And as we continue to adopt AI across all different segments, will only become stronger as we go on. Thank you everyone for joining this session. Thank you all the panelists, Manish, Karthik, Purushottam, and Kaushik, for enriching all of us, and thank you, IESA, for arranging this wonderful summit. And in case you guys want to reach us, all the panelists will be available for any one-on-one questionnaires or any help that you would need, beyond this panel. Thanks a lot.
Thank you, Mr. Ajay, and thank you all the panelists. It was very interesting. Subject matter expert was speaking, about this topic, and I want to especially thank Mr. Ajay Agarwal for chairing the session wonderfully. So thank you very much. So with that, we will move to the next session.